They're dead, Dave.
What, Captain Hollister?
Everybody's dead, Dave.
What, Todd Hunter? What, Selby? Not Jen.
He's dead, Dave. Everybody is dead. Everybody is dead, Dave.
Hello, welcome to Everybody is Dead Dave, the Red Dwarf review podcast where we make our way through every single episode of Red Dwarf. Myself, Phil Hawkins, and
me, Adam Martyn. Hello, everyone.
We are the two people that are coming from very different perspectives. I have been watching Red Dwarf for many years. I mean, you'll know this already. We say this quite a lot, but like by now, if you've been following the podcast, you know the shtick.
It's like the opening tagline, innit? You know.
Yeah, yeah. I've been watching for decades. Adam is watching it for the very first time. You know the score.
You know
the score. Yeah. We're up to The Inquisitor, the second episode of Series 5. And let me read the synopsis to
Go for it.
Give you a gist of what happens. The Red Dwarf crew encounter the Inquisitor, a mechanical life form who has made himself judge, jury, and executioner of all humanity throughout history. If he decides your life hasn't been worthy enough, you are erased and replaced. Bad luck for the dwarfers. Yes. Cool. I think a guy time traveling, erasing those who have lived unworthy lives is bad news for our little band of four, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, just a little bit. And it also reminded me of some other things, but we'll get to that when we get there.
I think there were a lot of we've talked a lot over the last couple of series about how they like to draw in film influences to a lot of these things, and I think there's quite a few obvious ones in this one, which I'm sure we'll get to. That we kind of get an opening scene that isn't the crew. It starts with the Inquisitor going about his duties, time traveling, erasing a guy from history for being unworthy. This was apparently originally planned to be a pre-credit sequence, a cold open. But then at the last minute, the higher-ups decided that they didn't want to do that. Because, on British TV, that wasn't the done thing in the 90s. You didn't really have pre-credit
it's
sequences.
A rarity.
Yeah, but I think it would have worked quite well to kind of set up the tension a bit if that had happened before the music and before the theme tune.
Yeah, because it's quite an ominous opening for Red Dwarf. Obviously, there are a few gags in there, but it is played mainly for that, like you say, like the tension, isn't it, and the stakes of it. Yeah, so I think that'd be cool with the cold open. Thinking about it now, it would have worked a lot better. But
what did you think of the Inquisitor when you first saw him?
Predator, maybe. Well, I don't. Yeah, I think I wrote somewhere. I'm trying to get. I think I wrote. I'm not saying this in a horrible way. It's just like, but it reminded me of those. So this is really random reference, but I used to go paintballing. Right, we've got a paintball field near where I live, and part of one of the game modes was they had Predator, in quotation marks, a guy dressed up as Predator who was like the invincible character. They go around, they could shoot you, even if you shot them they would. Do you know what I mean? You couldn't kill them, they'd just come to kill you. But the costume, bless their hearts, was very thrown together to look like Predator. And it gave me sort of that vibes, not in a disrespectful way, but it's like they wanted to do their own version but still have some Predator-ish vibes about it. So it kind of reminded me of that. Like right off the bat I was like, oh, that looks like Predator. And I think this would have aired a few years after Predator came out, because Predator was like 87, 88. This is like 92. So yeah, I don't know about you, but that was my first impression. I was like, oh, it's Predator.
It's not one that came to mind, actually, Predator, but I can see, now you've said it, I can see what you mean. I thought the mask was very effective. It was definitely very imposing. It was, quite great. It looked well put together. The mask itself didn't look, to me anyway, particularly cheap, or it looked like a good bit of costume design, I thought.
Yeah. I like the overall costume. Yeah, I don't know. There was just like and this is just me probably being cynical, but the visor for me looked a little bit like something you could get out of a shop, I guess.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, it is meant to look like a visor because he pulls it up later, doesn't he?
He does.
Which we'll get to. But overall, I thought it was quite... it got across the imposing nature of the character very well, which I do have to say was, for me, slightly undermined by the Scottish accent. Because
Yeah, I mean,
Not that Scottish people can't be imposing;
yeah.
they absolutely can.
Any Scots out there, you can be really imposing when you want to be. But
absolutely, I think it was just because I'm that type of character. I'm just not. It was just a bit of a surprise that it was a Scottish kind of. I don't know what accent I was expecting, but it wasn't Scottish.
The void you occupied in the space-time continuum will be allocated to a person who was never given the gift of life.
Yeah, I guess it's that thing, isn't it? Because when you're doing those like villain, deep booming voices, it's very so often like, I guess, that very low, like standard English or sometimes clipped English, you know, because it's the stereotype, I guess, at that point. So, and yeah, you can have villains that obviously have accents, of course. But yeah, I agree with you. Like at first, like the first scene, I was like, oh, that's a very pleasant Scottish accent, right? But I probably would have said the same, you know, if it was, you know, Yorkshire or any accent that wasn't like a standard
any particularly distinctive accent. I think it was that you're not expecting to come out of there. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But it was only that first scene. Rest of it, I didn't really clock it.
Yeah,
It was only that initial.
I think you adjust quite quickly to it.
Yeah.
So he deletes this poor guy from history for leaving, for not having, wasting his life and opportunity, living a worthless life, and he's replaced by someone with a similar mustache, but overall looks a bit like he works out a bit more. And I don't know, is that meant to imply that you've been more successful? I don't know. There's not really anything that like shows why this guy has been led a worthless life.
That. Like, I thought they'd explain that a little bit, or that maybe this guy who'd replaced him was going to play a part in the episode, but you don't see him after this scene. And I get it, they're just establishing the point that the Inquisitor replaces you, but yeah, with the attention they were giving him, I was like, okay, so why is he better? Or like you said, yeah, so I don't know, maybe they could have done that, but we see this happen again later in the episode, the idea of someone being deleted for something better, yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of establishes that. And then we go to what the crew, obviously a different time and a different place, what the Red Dwarf are up to. They're currently on Starbug. Again.
Yeah, again.
As I said,
there's a theme here. So.
Yeah. Well, clearly they just had a set. The standing sets, I think. I think there's less Red Dwarf standing sets for this series and more Starbug standing sets. So that's partly they made that decision.
Okay.
And Lister is reading the Aeneid by Virgil.
Yes, ripping
the
apart
comic
the
book
whole
version.
Oh, of course, the simplified version. But yeah, tearing apart the Trojan horse, and I thought, I like when he actually rips it apart, because when it makes sense what he's saying. Like when he explains it, it's like, yeah, how did they just accept this massive horse that could conveniently hold all these people? And yeah, he's got a point.
I mean, the Greeks have been camped outside Troy, kapowing, zapping and kasplatting the Trojans for the best part of a decade, yeah. So all of a sudden they wake up one morning and the Greeks have gone. And there outside the city walls, they've left this gift, this tribute to their valiant foes, a huge wooden horse. Just large enough to happily contain 500 Greeks in full battle dress and still leave adequate room for toilet facilities. Are you telling me that not one Trojan goes, hang on a minute, that's a bit of a funny prezi? What's wrong with a couple of 100 pairs of socks and some aftershave? No, they don't. They just wheel it in and all decide to go for an early night.
He's got a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I liked it. When they started going on, when it was just sort of about reading like Virgil and stuff, I thought, I was like, are we going to get a joke, like a really long build to a maybe not so good joke? Like, I've mentioned that before. But no, as soon as he started ripping it apart, I was with him then because, again, it makes sense and he sells it like that, So I liked it, actually. That's that little scene.
Yeah, it was nice. And I do like the fact that Lister, he's reading the Aeneid. You got to give credit for that, even if it is just a comic book,
Yeah.
Kind of a
He's
mixture
trying
of...
to engage his brain in that regard. Yeah.
Very quickly, though, he gets sort of taken over by this bolt of lightning, which comes the Inquisitor, and his voice, the Inquisitor's voice, is... I think it's meant to be that it's coming out of Lister, but it's not like his mouth moves in time with it. He's just kind of frozen.
And it's
a
classic
bit of a weird
90s
effect.
BBC lightning as well. Just one tiny little, little blue stream. Oh, it's sweet.
I thought that was a bit of a strange effect for what it seemed they were trying to get across, that he'd effectively taken over Lister's body.
Yeah, but I'm surprised though, because it implies that he's using Lister fully to like communicate, but they don't go the route of making Craig Charles mime the dialogue. I thought that was just an odd choice, because he just sort of stands there like he's being electrocuted, which, yeah, it works, but I don't know, I just found it, maybe they're trying to get across that the Inquisitor is like this ethereal being, but I don't know, it just seemed a bit odd that, okay, so he's taking control of him, but he's not using his mouth to, do you know what I mean? Like, he's not using Lister as a vessel, so to speak, he's halted his body, but why? Like, why does he need to do that if he's not going to use his voice? I don't know, that was what I thought anyway,
it was a bit strange.
Yeah.
A bit strange, that one. And then, so after that, he also controls the ship to turn around and start heading back towards Red Dwarf, where he's going to judge them all.
Yeah. So I was saying, another presenting your case / justice-y kind of episode,
Yes,
I
of
thought.
course.
I was like, oh,
we
okay.
have had that before in Justice, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, just
Although
that
this time
sort
it's
of...
not focused just on one person, which it was then.
And I guess like not like the
crew.
trial, but it was just that thing of like presenting reasons for, well, whatever your case is. Yeah, it just seems to be a recurring theme.
Yeah. Before they get back to Red Dwarf and have to face the Inquisitor, though, we get Crichton sort of gives us a bit of an exposition dump, but I think done quite well. I think it's, it doesn't feel like a tired exposition dump. It doesn't feel like it makes sense within the context. It's interesting, and basically he says that the Inquisitor is a simulant who lived to the end of time and came to the conclusion that there's no God and no afterlife. I think a missed opportunity to mention calculators here. And
yes. Oh, yes.
and where do all the calculators go if there's no afterlife? We do get a reference later on in the episode to Silicon Heaven from Crichton, so I will let him off there. But
yeah, no, the exposition was fine. I did think towards the end, I felt either the energy or the timing seemed a little bit off to me. It was when, I can't remember what Crichton says, but you know where Chris Barrington goes like, oh, and then ah. And like those quick like those just like one word reactions. For me, the timing just seemed a little slow. And I remember I paused it and went back and I thought, oh, is he taking time to like, do like a facial reaction first before the dialogue? And he isn't really. It's just sort of to me at least, and maybe it's because it's drilled into me after acting training. Like there's a big emphasis on, especially with things like that, all my teachers they were like, no pauses. It's like you've got to be like bam 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 to get it across. So maybe it's that screaming in my head. It just seemed a little bit like 1 second off for me.
Because I think there's definitely place for pauses, and I think even I know what you mean about there being no particular overemphasized facial expression to go with it, but I think him just kind of like, it's kind of like he was processing it for that few seconds. So it's like Crichton says, oh, he goes after, because the thing is that he after coming to the conclusion there was no God and no afterlife, comes to the conclusion that his only purpose of existence is to lead a worthwhile life. So he builds a time machine and goes back and assesses everyone's life of whether or not they've lived a worthwhile life, and deletes those that haven't and replaces them. So as he's sort of describing what would make someone live a worthwhile life, and Rim is questioning that, and it's like, I think that pause is quite important for him to go. It's kind of him going in his head, right, and then going, oh, because that's bad news for him.
Yeah, it's probably just me and all that drilled into my head. But yeah, I did notice it. Just for me, I thought, I'm maybe a little bit quicker, but personal perspective and whatever. So
yeah, Lister makes a point that I think I wish they delved into more and explored a bit more, which was like, who decides what's worthwhile? Because like we were saying, and this kind of ties in a bit to them not showing the why the guy in the opening scene had apparently led a worthwhile life.
Yeah.
Are we? It's kind of implied that's shown by the fact that he's slightly overweight and he happens to be in bed and has an untidy mustache, and the guy that he's replaced with is fit and healthy, slim, and has a tidy mustache. But that's like, I don't know. I wish they'd gone into more. Done a bit more of a series 1, series 2 type take on it, where they'd explored that as a theme a bit more about who decides what's worthwhile, which they didn't. They skirted around a little bit, but didn't really delve into much.
Yeah, because as we've said, Red Dwarf does do its like more philosophical or like messagey episodes, and I just thought this would have been it's a really good question to explore. Like, yeah, who does the? Because someone could be maybe not in a great place, like say I don't know in terms of like what they eat, for example, maybe like Lister. But at the end of the day, if he feels fulfilled and happy in whatever else he does in life, then surely that yeah, you're right. It's a really good question that they sadly don't take more time to delve into, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, plot-wise, they kind of skirt around having to deal with it.
Sort of, yeah.
By having the fact that people are judging themselves. Because when the Inquisitor lifts the mask, whoever there is on trial at that point, they're faced with themselves. And it's themselves who judge them.
More double acting for the cast, which I thought was great. Love seeing it when they double up.
So I guess that kind of from a plot perspective skirts around that question. But just I think it would have been interesting to explore a bit more.
Absolutely.
What did you think about all the people judging themselves?
I thought it was great because let's say the versions of them under the Inquisitor's mask were they'd responded exactly as you'd expect them to. Like Lister, first thing he says, "Oh, try and get out of this one, Smeghead." That's exactly what because Lister's always trying to get out of things. So of course he would say that to himself, and Cat as well. It wasn't my funniest one, but it was a potential, because Cat is just. So what about you then? He goes, I got a beautiful ass. And he's like, yeah, it's shallow, but that's right.
Yeah.
And we've seen that before when, I can't remember which one it was, but where Cat saw himself and they basically just compliment each other and all that stuff. So I love that. It's like very subtle continuity. Whenever Cat's faced with himself, it's all compliments or shallow, like, oh, but I look good. And they're like, oh, yeah. Like, of course, that's how they judge themselves.
Yeah. Rimmer has on display his usual self-loathing because as much as everyone else hates Rimmer, he kind of hates himself as well. And but he does
sad in a way.
he makes a point about how what do you expect given what I had to deal with as a kid, the way my parents were basically and how my brothers treated me, and that's kind of what saves him in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? I really quite liked Crichton's testimony. It was very. It wasn't really played for laughs that much. He gave a very, quite deep and well-argued, reasoning as to why he should, about him being a machine and how he sort of skirts around, I guess, the conventions of, I don't know, human thinking of what's, this and that. I quite liked it. Yeah,
well, it was interesting because he said that he can't justify. He kind of said, well, I can't because I am my programming and stuff, and you'd only be able to do this by breaking your programming. But he has broken his programming, so I'm not. That confused me slightly because we've seen Lister help him break his programming in the past. So I thought,
or maybe he was just doing it to save face in front of himself, trying to. Yeah,
maybe. And then of course Lister just tells him to smeg off and doesn't even bother trying to justify anything.
As you'd expect.
Yeah.
So.
So we get to the final judgment, and it's Lister and Crichton are the ones to get erased. Yes. So he changes the timeline first, and then he goes to erase them, but future Crichton pops up behind him, and I love
with
this
a laser chainsaw.
Yeah, laser chainsaw, and he's like. I love the way he's just going on about how when he's explaining them, because he chops the hand off, throws them the gauntlet, and then future Crichton is explaining to past Crichton and Lister, what's happening, and he's literally saying,
while I'm standing here explaining this to you, the Inquisitor jumps me from behind like this.
Yeah.
It was a very good scene. Very well done.
It is. And the minute he cut off the gauntlet, I was like, oh... I mean, Phil, you're an MCU man. I was getting major Thanos Infinity Gauntlet, wiping people out. I was like, this all makes sense. I was like, they were doing Infinity War way before its time. I mean, it sort of is, isn't it? A glove that has the power to erase or bring back people.
Yeah.
That's basically the Infinity Gauntlet, just without the stones.
Yeah, and we get some lovely timey-wimey stuff, which us Doctor Who fans love.
We do. We love to pick it apart for all it's worth.
Yeah, and then they run into Kat and Rimmer, who don't recognise them.
No, because since they've technically been, they've been erased from their timeline or whatever, or the trace of them, has been wiped from the ship. Yeah, no one recognized.
Yeah, there was some nice deep continuity references when Lister is trying to convince him that he knows him. He's like, I know you, Rimmer. And then he mentions like the bronze swimming certificate, which the BSc is on his thing. He mentions the Samaritan switchboard thing from like series 2 or whenever it was, or 3. And he mentions his brothers as well. All things like, so there's some nice like just like nice little Easter eggs in there for the fans that recognize these references back to previous episodes.
Yeah,
I like that.
And that's some of the best like Red Dwarfisms, as it were. Those like little deep continuity references to things like that. No, it's really good. And I mean, aside from that, then we get alternative versions of Lister and Crichton popping up, and then I was like, oh my god, more MCU references. This is now like Loki.
Oh yes, the variants.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, we won't spoil it. But I mean, you probably know from the trailer. You know, alternate dimensions, timelines are involved. Different variants. That's the buzzword, variant. I was like, there's so many variants running around. So yeah, 2 MCU references in one episode. I couldn't believe it.
Okay, I'm not quite sure we can justify calling them references when this happened a good, like, 15 years before
they anticipated it. The creators, Naylor and Grant, they should be onto Disney for this. They'd be like, hang on, you watched this episode and thought, yep, there's our ideas. But it's just funny, isn't it? How because obviously in media ideas repeat, and it's just funny that 2 concepts linked to one franchise popped up, as they anticipated or whatever. But yeah, I just found it quite funny. But
yeah,
but played
and
by
the one
actors.
from the alternative Lister, I think they describe it as like basically as if a different sperm had got to the egg first, but it like his sperm brother, I think he calls him at one point,
something like that. Yeah,
and Crichton is just a different android.
Who I noticed in the credits doesn't get a credit. I think only I did watch that. I think only the alternative alternative Lister gets a credit. But yeah, found that odd.
Let me see if it's on the.
Yeah,
have you looked on IMDb?
Obviously it wasn't Robert Llewellyn. It was a different actor. But yeah, I just found that odd.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if second Crichton, Tim Yates.
Tim Yates. Oh, maybe I missed it.
It does say uncredited, so obviously it wasn't
okay.
on the actual credits of the episode, and he has no other credits. So
maybe one time
he has only played. In fact, he's had 3 roles on Red Dwarf, and that is his entirety of his thing. So I think he might have just been somebody that was on the crew, maybe.
Yeah,
that they just happened to
jump in. Yeah.
Jump in.
Who's done a bit of acting? Oh, you come and jump in. Yeah, it could be.
It could be.
I mean, he's not exactly in it for a long time, is he? So
no.
Bless their hearts.
One thing about this though, that I was like, how does that make sense? Because the implication is that these guys have replaced, our Lister and Rimmer because our Lister and Rimmer aren't worthy, haven't led worthy lives, haven't done anything with their lives. But these new ones seem to be. There's
exactly
nothing different.
The same. Yeah,
that like they're in the exact same situation. The Lister seems to act the same way. He dresses the same way. This show, the episode doesn't like. It's a similar problem to that first opening scene where they didn't show us why that guy was unworthy, and they haven't shown us why this new version is worthy over our Lister. So it feels like that's missing.
And they don't really give it. Well, they don't really give it much time, to even explain it. Because as soon as these 2 guys appear, within about 2 minutes, the Inquisitor kills them off. Yeah. So it's almost
it wouldn't have taken much, just like a line or something, just something to show that they had done something. That android had broken its programming. That Lister maybe like a line about having before the accident married Kachansky or something like that. I don't know, just done.
Yeah, just something different because it just it just sort of comes off as, oh, there's new versions. We're not really going to explain why they're more worthy or whatever. Oh, and now they're dead. Like it just seems more like we had an idea and now we're going with another idea. But as we've said many a time, I think maybe also it's the classic, Red Dwarf's at this point 25 minutes, and they're probably like, oh, we've got like 10 minutes left on the clock, we got to move this along. I mean, we've said that multiple times, haven't we? Things that we wish had like more time to be fleshed out or explored, and they might, they may not have just simply had the time to do it,
But that's when they sort of the plan starts kicking into action and what they're going to do to save themselves.
Yes.
And they go up against, with the gauntlet, the creature, the Inquisitor. And at one point, Lister gets turned into sort of little boy Lister, like, I don't know, 8-year-old Lister.
Yep.
And then old man Lister.
Old man Lister.
And who I don't know if it was just me, who looked a lot more white than Craig Charles or the boy was.
They chose an interesting person to be Old Man Lister. And just to randomly tie it in with Marvel again, imagine if they did like a version of Logan but called it Lister, and it was all dark and gritty and like Lister as an old man, like being very bitter or whatever. That
Old man Lister.
Quite funny. Yeah, Old Man Lister.
Well, as we've been discussing off air, they're not that far away from that. Probably nowadays, the actors themselves.
If anyone's listening, Old Man Lister.
Craig Charles is in his 50s now. I mean, he's still looking very good for his 50s, I must say.
I think they're all looking very good for their ages, to be fair. When you see like modern pictures of them, they're all looking very good. So
they are indeed. I like the line from Crichton where he goes, "All in all, today's been a bit of a bummer, hasn't it, sir?"
Yeah, it's just like this has been a day. And
nice bit of understatement.
Don't you just love how the time-space continuum just reorganizes itself and how handy that is? Yeah. Oh, well, just before, talk about the scene when Lister decides to face the Inquisitor. Another showdown. We've seen a few of these now, like the one-on-one Western-esque showdown and all that sort of stuff, and how Lister gets the one-up on the Inquisitor with some timey-wimey stuff, of course. Some time travel logic, which initially we think, he didn't think that through, because he says, if you erase me, he saves his life. He puts him in a position where he's dangling and gonna die, and it's only because he saves his life. So he says, you can't erase me because you'd die in that thing. But obviously, if he didn't exist, he wouldn't have been, the Inquisitor wouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. Exactly.
So we think, initially we think, Lister, you didn't think through your time travel logic there. Yeah. But he did, because he wanted the Inquisitor to think he'd won there, so that he would then use the glove, which they'd rejigged to backfire, and Inquisitor wipes himself out.
He does. And time reorganizes itself just like that.
Yeah, and we get, therefore, this has quite wide implications, because he's been going around changing history for a long time by erasing different people. And now all of those people are back. So history is now potentially very different. So we get another one of these big, nice, we've had one before, I think, where there's this nice convenient plot point where you can just, any continuity inconsistencies, you can go, that's why. Different timeline now. Different things have happened. And there is actually a really interesting theory that I saw on a YouTube video on a channel called Red Dwarf Nerd, I think it's called. Great channel. And he has a theory video on there about an in-universe reason why you won't know this necessarily. I think I've mentioned it before, but the actress who plays Kachansky, up until now, has been the Scottish actress that we've seen several times. Not so much recently, but we have seen her. And then later on, she's played by a different actress. And this theory video posits that this is the reason, like in-universe reason why. Because the theory, I think, goes that the version of that we get later on is the unworthy version. And therefore, when in the original timeline where the Inquisitor had erased a load of unworthy people, he'd erased her and replaced her with the Scottish version of herself.
Right, okay.
And therefore,
All right.
by undoing all of his stuff here, it changed the timeline, and that's why we get the Chloe Arnett version. Is that her name, Chloe Arnett?
Maybe, yeah. I can't wait for this to have implications whenever the production team decide they want there to be implications.
Yeah, I mean, it will never come up as something we see as confirmed, but it's just a fan theory. But it's a fan theory I really like to explain, the casting change for that actress.
I can get behind that. That completely.
It's good. I'll link the video for anybody in the YouTube description if you're watching on YouTube. I'll link Red Dwarf Nerd's video on the subject down below as well. So if you want to check that out too.
Yeah.
And here it explained a lot better than I just explained it. And yeah, so everything's sort of, as far as we know, back to normal. But
yes,
any other future inconsistencies can now be explained.
Now be parred away. So.
Yeah, by this. So yeah, do you have a favorite character from this episode?
I do, and I'm going to give it to Crichton because he actually, I thought he did great in this one because, like I mentioned earlier, when he gave his testimony, I liked seeing a side of Crichton that was more, I guess, like analytical and a bit more cunning in a way. Like we were sort of saying, maybe he's trying to cheat the Inquisitor, really, about challenging his way of how he's programmed, even though he's broken his programming. I like seeing a different side of Crichton, but he's also very funny. One of my funniest moments, which I'll mention in a moment, but his whole reaction to the spare hand, and then that scene where him and him and Lister are together, and he's like starts panicking with his leg. That I'll mention it in depth in a second, but yeah. So I'm going to give it to Crichton.
I have a feeling we've got the same favourite moment.
We might do, but yeah, for me, he stood out completely in this one.
Yeah, it sounds like we're in complete agreement here because I'm picking Crichton as well because of that, and I think just consistently throughout the episode, he also has the funniest moments. This episode, there's that whole the bit where the future him appears as well, which is great.
Yeah.
We get the bit of the hand, which we're going to talk about in a second. There's just lots of really nice bits and really funny bits with Crichton this episode. So also Crichton. So let's talk about the hand.
Yes, yeah.
That's your funniest moment, is it?
It is, but I think slightly more the reaction to the hand the first time. When Lister's trying to hide it from him, and then he goes,
Logically, sir, there is only one way you could possibly have opened that door.
And then he just goes,
Oh, sir, you've got it in your jacket!
I got it out of a hole, didn't I?
Oh, sir, you are sick! You are a sick, sick person!
It's so good. I mean, perfect reaction from Robert Llewellyn, just completely sells it. And yeah, and it sort of gets a brief mention at the end. You don't see a reaction from Crichton, but Lister holds up the hand at it's the very last frame, isn't it? So it gets a nice little throwback. But also a close second is that scene they then have in that room where Crichton starts panicking and his legs shaking and he starts shouting. He goes, "I do believe in Silicon Heaven," and all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he can break his programming and lie, but when he does, he gets a bit of a nervous twitch in his leg.
We've only just heard that now, but yeah, he's got the nervous twitch. But yeah, but no, definitely the hand for me. Getting into that room, my favourite. What about you?
Same. It's the hand and the reaction, just the whole like, "Oh, you sick."
Yeah,
it's just like he's getting really and he's kind of like flapping and like hitting him as well as like
the classic like not really hitting him but doing like the awful person. Yeah, no, it's brilliant, really good.
It is really good. So how many scutters out of 10 would you give this episode?
I gave this one a 7.5. Yeah, I would have, in a way, because this is dealing with like time travel and like you're saying, like different timelines, alternate versions, and because the Inquisitor has the potential to be like, as you say, like this really menacing character. I know we've mentioned this before, but I think this really could have been a contender for a 2-part story. Really, like you could have a really cool cliffhanger moment. Like, what if one of the main cast does get erased, like permanently? Like, how do you resolve? Do you know what I mean? I thought that could have been a really cool 2-part story. So. So where it loses points for me is just the thing we've mentioned before. I think sometimes they try and cram so much in, which is great, but it just doesn't all work in that 25-minute format. Like we said, points get dashed over, like the alternative Lister and Crichton. They're there, and then they're not there. No real no real further into that. So, but yeah, 7.5 for me. There were the jokes were good, as we mentioned, a lot of strong jokes, and yeah, that's mine. What about yours?
I've been like going between a few different numbers. I'm not sure. It's somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5. I'm not entirely sure where am I going to put it. I'm going to put it. I think I gave. What did I give the last episode? 8.5.
I think.
Or
Yes. 8. Yeah. I think you did 8.5. 8.5.
Okay.
Did, yeah.
I'm going to give this an 8. I think.
Okay.
It's weird because, like, this has some really strong moments in it. I liked I think last week's episode was a bit more this has more weaknesses in it as well. It has some really strong moments and some that are stronger than last week's.
Yeah.
But it also has these weird moments where I don't think they like the fact that they didn't really show us why someone was either worthy or not worthy. They just and how this Lister was different. That is quite a big flaw in this episode for me.
Okay, fair
just
enough.
that the whole, and even though it's Red Dwarf, and even though we don't expect it to be fully like logical and consistent the whole time, because it is a sitcom, I kind of want it to be logical within its own logic, if that makes sense. I want, like, within the episode. I don't mind if it doesn't make sense with other episodes when you look at them together, because this thing contradicts that. But within the episode itself, it should have like a coherency to it. That's not a word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I get you.
Well, there we go. That is another episode down.
Another one in the can.
Ah, well, look at that.
Snap. We've been doing this for a while, you can tell. No, it's good.
Yeah. We'll be back again next week for another brand new episode. In the meantime, do go check us out elsewhere on the internet. Adam, where can they find you?
Where can you find me? YouTube, Adam Martyn with a Y. I should pop up. I make videos. A lot of them are on Doctor Who, but I do other stuff as well. You know, classic TV, history, idents. Now that's what I call music. Whatever I want to make, really. And yeah, we also have a podcast. Of course, we have a podcast.
Yeah, we have a podcast. We're talking on it right now.
No way. We have a Twitter account.
Is this the first time you've realised we've got a podcast? Because I just thought we'd just been chatting.
I don't know what I thought this was, but
6 months.
The simulation is broken. Yeah, we have a Twitter account for the podcast, is what I was meant to say. All Dead Dave Pod. We will come up, give us a follow for updates on the show and general Red Dwarf tweets and whatnot.
The occasional Red Dwarf GIF just for fun.
Yeah, just because who doesn't love a GIF? We all love GIFs every now and then. And yeah, if you want to find me on Twitter, just Adam Martyn AMTV. Come follow me for daily ramblings. What about you, Phil?
And, well, if you're not listening or watching this on YouTube, then do check me out there, which is just Philip Hawkins, my name, 1L. And I talk about Doctor Who, MCU, Star Trek, Masters of the Universe. Well, I've one video about Masters of the Universe, because there's the new series, which as of today I've watched, because it's just got released the day we're recording. By the time this comes out, it would have been out a while. And I have recorded a review yet to edit it.
Okay.
And yeah, all sorts of things. Anything pop culture that takes my fancy, really. So yeah, check me out there. And yeah, that's kind of it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz as well. That really helps out the pod on YouTube, and like it. And I don't know what do you do on Apple Podcast? Do you like?
Yeah,
follow,
whatever the button is. Yeah,
leave us a review as well. On Apple.
Please do. We like feedback
elsewhere. It's always good. Thanks for watching or listening or doing whatever you're doing. You can tell it's late. We've done a double recording today and recorded 2 episodes in one day, and now I'm tired.
And it's hot. It's hot, guys. You know, there's been a heat wave this week. I don't know about you. My body's drained from this heat now. So yeah,
yes.
But we're doing this. We're doing this for you. Because we like doing this. So yeah.
Yeah. So join us again next time, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.
See you later.